The wagon rattled to a stop in front of the ranch house, just as the Kansas sun began its descent toward the horizon. And Clara Newell clutched her worn carpetbag tighter, knowing this was her last chance at survival in a world that had stripped away everything she once held dear. She stepped down from the dusty stage. Her black morning dress faded to gray after 2 years of constant wear. The driver had dropped her at the edge of a sprawling cattle ranch outside Wichita, Kansas, in the late summer of 1878. Clara was 23 years old, a widow without family or fortune, and the advertisement for a housekeeper position had been her salvation when the boarding house in St. Louis had finally refused her any more credit. The ranch stretched out before her in rolling prairie land, dotted with grazing cattle that looked like small specks against the golden grass. The house itself was larger than she had expected, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch that had seen better days. Paint peeled from the railings, and one of the shutters hung at an odd angle. Clara could see why they needed a housekeeper. A tall figure emerged from the barn, leading a chestnut mare by the reins. Even from a distance, Clara could see the confident way he moved, each step purposeful and steady. As he drew closer, she took in his sun-bronzed features, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of whiskey in lamplight. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat that had been shaped by weather and use. "Miss Newell." His voice was deeper than she had expected, with a roughness that suggested years of calling orders across open range. "Yes, you must be Mr. Gray Xavier." Clara straightened her spine, determined to make a good impression despite her threadbare appearance. "Just Gray. Nobody around here uses full names much." He tied the mare to the hitching post and removed his hat, revealing more of his face. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most. There were lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun, and a small scar cut through his left eyebrow. "You had a long journey, 3 days from St. Louis." Clara shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how tired she was. "The advertisement said you needed someone to manage the household," Gray nodded, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She wondered what he saw: a desperate woman past her prime for marriage, worn down by grief and hardship. "My father built this place 20 years ago. When he passed last winter, I inherited it along with my younger brother. But neither of us knows the first thing about keeping a house running. We have 3 ranch hands who bunk in the old cabin, and they have been eating beans and burnt beef for 6 months." Despite herself, Clara felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I can certainly do better than beans and burnt beef. The pay is what was listed: room and board, plus $15 a month. It is not much, but it is honest work." Gray replaced his hat. "Come on, I will show you the house." Clara followed him up the porch steps, noting the dust that had accumulated on every surface. Inside, the house was even more neglected than the exterior suggested. Dirty dishes were piled in the kitchen basin, dust covered the furniture, and muddy boot prints tracked across the wooden floors. But beneath the grime, Clara could see good bones, solid construction, large windows that let in plenty of light, and furniture that had been well made even if it was now buried under clutter. "My brother Tom and I have been focused on the cattle," Gray said, sounding almost apologetic. "We lost some stock to rustlers last spring, and then the summer drought hit hard. The house sort of fell by the wayside." "I understand." Clara set down her carpetbag and looked around with fresh eyes, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. "Where would I be staying?" "There is a room off the kitchen. It was meant to be for hired help. It is small, but it has a good window and a decent bed." Gray gestured toward a door Clara had not noticed. "You want to see it before you decide." The room was indeed small, but it was clean compared to the rest of the house, with whitewashed walls and a simple iron bed frame. A washstand stood in the corner, and the window overlooked what had once been a vegetable garden. To Clara, who had been sleeping on a lumpy mattress in a crowded boarding house room shared with two other women, it looked like paradise. "It is perfect," she said quietly, something in Gray's expression softened. "Good. I will let you get settled then. Tom will be in from the north pasture around sunset. We usually eat around 7 if you think you can manage something by then." Clara glanced at the angle of the sun through the window. That gave her perhaps 2 hours. "I will find something." After Gray left, Clara changed out of her traveling dress and into her one-work dress, a simple brown cotton that had been patched so many times the original fabric was hard to identify. She tied an apron around her waist and assessed the kitchen with a practical eye. The pantry was surprisingly well stocked, though disorganized. She found flour, salt, dried beans, coffee, and even some preserved vegetables in mason jars. The root cellar yielded potatoes, onions, and carrots. In the smokehouse, she discovered bacon and a ham. These men might not know how to cook, but they had clearly ensured they had provisions. Clara worked quickly, her hands remembering skills her mother had taught her before scarlet fever had taken both her parents when Clara was 16. She had married Richard Newell a year later, a quiet schoolteacher who had promised her stability and kindness. He had delivered both until consumption had stolen his life 2 years into their marriage. Since then, Clara had survived on odd jobs and the charity of strangers, watching her savings dwindle to nothing. She pushed the memories aside and focused on the task at hand. She fried bacon until it was crispy, then used the drippings to brown cubed potatoes. She added onions and carrots, then cracked eggs over the top and covered it all to let the eggs set. It was simple fare, but hearty and much better than burnt beef. She had just finished setting the table when she heard boots on the porch. 2 male voices carried through the door, one belonging to Gray and another that was younger, with a lighter tone. "I am telling you, she looked about ready to collapse," Gray was saying. "We need to make sure she does not work herself to death the first week. If she can cook better than you, she can work as hard as she wants." The other voice replied with a laugh. They came through the door together, and Clara got her first look at Tom Xavier. He was clearly Gray's younger brother, with the same tall build and dark hair, though his eyes were blue rather than brown, and his face had not yet acquired the weathered quality of his brother's. He looked to be perhaps 25, with an easy smile and relaxed manner that contrasted with Gray's more serious demeanor. Tom stopped short when he saw the set table. "Is that actual food? Real, cooked food that is not black on the outside and raw on the inside?" "Tom, manners," Gray said, but there was amusement in his voice. Clara felt herself relax slightly. "It is nothing fancy, just what I could put together quickly. Tomorrow I will have time to plan something better." "Madam, if it tastes half as good as it smells, it is better than anything we have had in months," Tom said earnestly. "I am Tom Xavier, in case my brother forgot to mention me. Clara Newell. It is nice to meet you both properly." They sat down to eat, and Clara was gratified to see both men eat with genuine enthusiasm. She had worried that her simple cooking might not be enough, but they praised everything, even asking for seconds. "Miss Newell, where did you learn to cook like this?" Tom asked, sopping up the last of his eggs with a piece of bread Clara had found and toasted. "My mother taught me, and please call me Clara. Miss Newell sounds too formal for a housekeeper." "Then you have to call us Gray and Tom," Tom said immediately. "We are not formal people." Gray was quieter, but Clara caught him watching her with that same intense gaze from earlier. When their eyes met, he looked away quickly, focusing on his plate. She found herself curious about this serious rancher who had inherited his father's land and seemed to carry the weight of it on his shoulders. After dinner, Clara insisted on cleaning up while the men went to check on the animals one last time before bed. She washed dishes in hot water she heated on the stove, then swept the kitchen floor. It was only a start, but already the house felt more livable. She was drying the last plate when Gray came back inside. "You did not have to do all that tonight," he said. "I do not mind. I like keeping busy." Clara hung the dish towel to dry. "Is there anything specific you need me to focus on? Any particular way you want things done?" Gray removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "I am not good at this. I have never had to manage a household or tell someone how to do it. Just do what seems right to you. If we do not like something, we will say so, but I suspect we will be happy with whatever you do." There was something vulnerable in his admission, and Clara found herself warming to him. "All right. Then I will start with a thorough cleaning tomorrow, and once I have everything organized, I can establish a routine." "That sounds fine." Gray hesitated, then added, "I am glad you came, Clara. I know this is not much of a position, but I hope you will be comfortable here." "I am grateful for the opportunity," Clara said honestly. "You have no idea how much I needed this." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding of two people who had both faced hardship and were simply trying to survive. Gray nodded and bid her good night, and Clara retreated to her small room, feeling more hopeful than she had in years. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn, a habit formed from years of making the most of every day. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen to start breakfast. She found eggs in the henhouse, which she had not explored the night before, and made scrambled eggs with ham and biscuits from scratch. Gray and Tom appeared as the sun was rising, looking surprised to find breakfast already waiting. "You did not have to get up so early," Gray said, but he accepted the plate Clara handed him with obvious appreciation. "I have always been an early riser," Clara replied. "Besides, I have a lot to do today if I am going to get this house in order." She spent the morning cleaning with a determination born of purpose. She opened windows to air out the stale smell, beat dust from curtains and rugs, scrubbed floors until they gleamed, and organized the chaos that had accumulated in every room. By midday, the downstairs was transformed. Clara made a simple lunch of sandwiches and brought them out to the men, who were working in the corral with some young horses. She stood at the fence watching as Gray patiently worked with a skittish colt, his movements calm and steady. He spoke in a low voice, too quiet for Clara to hear the words, but the horse responded to his tone, gradually settling. "He has always been good with horses," Tom said, coming to stand beside her. "Better with them than with people, honestly." Clara glanced at him. "He seems like a good man." "He is. Best man I know, actually." Tom accepted a sandwich with a grateful smile. "He took over the ranch when our father got sick, ran everything while I was still too young to be much help. He could have sold it after the old man died, taken his share and gone somewhere easier. But he stayed because this is home." Clara heard the respect and love in Tom's voice and understood that she had come to work for men who valued loyalty and hard work. It made her want to prove herself worthy of this chance they had given her. That afternoon, as Clara was washing windows in the front room, she saw a rider approaching. Gray emerged from the barn and met the visitor, a lean man with a sheriff's badge glinting on his vest. They spoke for several minutes, their expression serious, and Clara saw Gray's jaw tighten. When the sheriff rode away, Gray stood for a moment looking toward the horizon before returning to the barn. Clara finished the windows, wondering what news the lawman had brought. At dinner, which Clara had made special pot roast with vegetables, and an apple pie she had managed using preserved apples from the cellar. Tom and Gray were quieter than they had been the night before. "Is something wrong?" Clara finally asked, unable to bear the tension any longer. Gray and Tom exchanged glances. "There has been trouble with a gang operating in the area," Gray said finally. "The Dalton cousins and their friends. They have been rustling cattle and robbing stages. The sheriff thinks they might hit some of the ranches next." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "Are we in danger?" "We will be careful," Gray said firmly. "Tom and I will take turns keeping watch at night, and we have rifles if we need them. But I do not want you to worry. We will keep you safe." The certainty in his voice reassured her more than the words themselves. Clara nodded, grateful for his protection even as she hated feeling helpless. The days fell into a rhythm. Clara rose early to make breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and organizing, prepared lunch, tackled more projects in the afternoon, and made dinner in the evenings. Slowly, the house transformed from a neglected bachelor dwelling into a real home. She mended curtains, planted a new vegetable garden, organized the pantry, and even convinced Gray to let her hire a local woman to help with the heavier washing once a week. The work was hard, but Clara thrived on it. For the first time since Richard's death, she felt useful and valued. Gray and Tom both made a point of thanking her for her efforts, and she could see the appreciation in their eyes when they came home to a clean house and a hot meal. But it was Gray who occupied more and more of Clara's thoughts. She found herself watching for him during the day, making excuses to bring water out to wherever he was working. She learned his habits, how he took his coffee black and strong, how he liked his eggs cooked firm, how he always checked the locks on the doors before bed. She noticed the little things, like the way he was always gentle with the animals, patient with Tom when his younger brother made mistakes, and fair with the ranch hands. One evening, about 3 weeks after Clara's arrival, a storm rolled across the prairie. The wind howled around the house, and rain lashed against the windows. Clara was cleaning up after dinner when she heard a crash from the porch. She hurried to investigate and found that the wind had torn loose one of the shutters. It was banging against the house with each gust. Before she could think better of it, Clara grabbed a shawl and went outside to secure it. The rain soaked through her clothes almost immediately, and the wind nearly knocked her off her feet. She grabbed the shutter and was trying to latch it when strong hands closed over hers. "What are you doing out here?" Gray shouted over the wind. "Get back inside. The shutter was going to break," Clara shouted back. "I will fix it. Go." Gray practically pushed her toward the door, and Clara stumbled back into the house, dripping water all over the clean floor. She stood shivering, watching through the window as Gray secured the shutter with quick, efficient movements. When he came back inside, he was as soaked as she was, his shirt plastered to his chest and water dripping from his hair. "You could have been hurt," he said, and there was something fierce in his voice that made Clara's breath catch. "I was just trying to help," she said quietly. "I know. But Clara, you do not have to risk yourself for a piece of wood. You are more important than a shutter." Gray took a step closer, and Clara found herself unable to look away from his eyes. "You are more important than you know." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Clara had not felt since before Richard died. She saw something in Gray's face that made her heart pound, a tenderness mixed with longing that mirrored her own growing feelings. Then Tom's footsteps sounded on the stairs, and the spell broke. Gray stepped back, clearing his throat. "You should get out of those wet clothes before you catch cold." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice, and hurried to her room. She changed into dry clothes with trembling hands, her mind racing. Had she imagined the look in Gray's eyes? No, she was certain she had not. But what did it mean? Was she foolish to hope that this strong, capable man might see her as more than just his housekeeper? She lay awake long into the night, listening to the storm rage outside and feeling her own internal storm of emotions. The next morning, there was a new awkwardness between Clara and Gray. He seemed to avoid looking directly at her, and she caught herself being overly careful not to accidentally touch him when passing dishes at breakfast. Tom noticed, his gaze moving between them with obvious curiosity, but he kept his observations to himself. Clara threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, trying to distract herself from thoughts of Gray. She baked bread, scrubbed the upstairs rooms, and started sewing new curtains for the front room. But no matter how busy she kept herself, she was always aware of where Gray was, what he was doing in the afternoon. While Clara was hanging laundry in the yard, one of the ranch hands came galloping up to the house. "Gray, we have got cattle scattered all over the north section. That storm last night must have spooked them and brought down a section of fence." Gray and Tom quickly saddled their horses, preparing to spend the rest of the day rounding up the scattered herd. Gray paused before mounting, looking at Clara with concern. "Will you be all right here alone?" "We might not be back until after dark." "I will be fine," Clara assured him. "Just be careful." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "I will." Clara watched them ride away, then returned to her chores. But as the afternoon wore into evening and the men did not return, she began to worry. She kept dinner warm on the stove and found herself going to the window every few minutes to look for approaching riders. Darkness fell, and still there was no sign of Gray or Tom. Clara lit lamps throughout the house, telling herself they were probably just working late, that everything was fine. But she could not shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. It was nearly 9 o'clock when she finally heard horses approaching. Clara rushed to the door, relief flooding through her when she saw Gray and Tom dismounting. But her relief turned to alarm when she saw that Gray was holding his left arm awkwardly against his side. "What happened?" she demanded, hurrying down the porch steps. "He got kicked by a spooked cow," Tom said before Gray could downplay it. "Caught him right in the ribs." "It is nothing," Gray protested. "Just bruised." "You can barely move that arm," Tom countered, "and I heard the crack when it happened." Clara did not hesitate. She took Gray's good arm and guided him into the house, ignoring his protests. "Sit down and let me look at it." "Clara, I am fine, really." "Sit down." Clara used the firmest voice she possessed, and to her surprise, Gray obeyed. She carefully helped him remove his shirt, trying not to let her awareness of his bare chest distract her from the task at hand. A dark bruise was already forming along his left ribs, and when Clara gently pressed the area, Gray winced despite his attempts to hide it. "I do not think anything is broken," Clara said, "but you are going to be very sore for a while. You need to rest and let it heal." "I cannot rest. We still have cattle to round up, and Tom and the hands can handle it," Clara interrupted. "You will not be any good to anyone if you make this worse." She went to the kitchen and returned with a wet cloth, which she used to clean the dirt and sweat from Gray's face and arms with a tenderness that surprised them both. Gray watched her with an expression she could not quite read, his breathing uneven. "You do not have to take care of me," he said quietly. "It is not part of your job." Clara paused, the cloth still in her hand. "Maybe not, but I want to." Their eyes met, and Clara saw the same intensity from the night of the storm, magnified now by the intimacy of the moment. Gray reached up with his good hand and caught her wrist, his thumb brushing against her pulse point. "Clara, he stopped, seeming to struggle with what he wanted to say. "These past few weeks, having you here, it has been—" "I know," Clara whispered, because she did know. She felt it too, this growing connection between them that went far beyond employer and employee. Tom cleared his throat loudly from the doorway, and Clara and Gray sprang apart like guilty children. "Sorry to interrupt, but I am going to head to bed. Long day tomorrow." He grinned at them both. "Gray, listen to Clara and rest that arm. Good night." After Tom left, an awkward silence fell. Clara busied herself putting away the cloth and getting Gray a glass of water. "You should eat something. I kept dinner warm." "I am not hungry," Gray said, but his stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. Despite the tension, Clara found herself smiling. "Liar. Come on, I will fix you a plate." They ate together at the kitchen table, a quiet meal that felt strangely domestic. Clara found herself imagining what it would be like if this were their routine, if she were not just the housekeeper, but something more. She pushed the thought away, not wanting to hope for something that might be impossible. When Gray finally headed up to bed, he paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Clara, thank you for taking care of me." "Always," she said before she could stop herself. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Gray smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face, and Clara's heart skipped a beat. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Gray." Over the next few days, Clara fussed over Gray despite his protests that he was fine. She made sure he took it easy, brought him meals when he tried to work too hard, and checked his injury each evening. The bruise turned spectacular shades of purple and green, but it was healing well. Their interactions during this time took on a new quality. Gray seemed to seek out reasons to be near her, lingering over breakfast, finding excuses to come into the house during the day. Clara caught herself touching him more than necessary, her hand resting on his shoulder a moment too long, her fingers brushing his when she handed him things. Tom watched their growing closeness with barely concealed amusement. "You know," he said to Clara one afternoon when Gray was out of earshot, "I have not seen my brother smile this much in years. You are good for him." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "I am just doing my job." "We both know it is more than that," Tom said gently. "And for what it is worth, I think you two are perfect for each other. Gray needs someone like you, someone strong and capable who is not afraid to stand up to him. And you deserve someone who will appreciate you and treat you right." "Tom, I am just saying, life is short. My brother has spent too much time alone working himself to the bone, and you have clearly been through hard times. You both deserve happiness." He patted her shoulder and walked away, leaving Clara to ponder his words. That evening after dinner, Gray asked Clara to take a walk with him. They strolled toward the corral in the fading light, the summer air warm and sweet with the smell of prairie grass. "Tom tells me you have done wonders with the garden," Gray said. "He said you are growing enough vegetables to feed an army." "Hardly an army," Clara said with a laugh. "But yes, it is coming along nicely. I enjoy working with the plants, watching things grow." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, then Gray stopped, turning to face her. "Clara, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "All right. When I placed that advertisement for a housekeeper, I was just looking for someone to cook and clean. I never expected," he paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I never expected you." "What do you mean?" Clara asked, though she thought she knew. "I mean that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about having a clean house and decent meals. Somewhere along the way, I started looking forward to seeing you every morning. I started making excuses to come inside just to hear your voice or see your smile. And I realized that I have been lying to myself about what I really want." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Gray, let me finish, please." He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I know this is not what you signed on for. You came here to work, not to deal with your employer having feelings for you. And if you want things to stay professional, I will respect that. But I had to tell you the truth. Clara, I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, and Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "You foolish man," she whispered. "I have been falling in love with you for weeks now, and I have been terrified to admit it because I thought you could never see me as anything more than the hired help." Gray's face broke into a brilliant smile, and he pulled her closer with his good arm. "You could never be just the hired help. From the moment you stepped off that wagon, determined and brave despite everything you had been through, I was drawn to you. You brought life back to this house, Clara. You brought life back to me." He leaned down, and Clara rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was tender and sweet, full of promise and hope. Clara felt something in her chest unfurl, a joy she had thought she would never feel again. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Gray rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have much to offer you. Just a ranch that is mortgaged and a house that needs work and a life that can be hard sometimes. But if you will have me, I swear I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "Gray Xavier, I do not need wealth or an easy life," Clara said firmly. "I need someone who sees me, who values me for who I am, someone who makes me feel safe and cherished. You offer me everything that truly matters." They kissed again, and this time there was more passion in it, the culmination of weeks of growing attraction and denied feelings. Gray's arm tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Clara buried her fingers in his hair, not caring that she was probably being too bold. A wolf whistle from the direction of the house broke them apart. Tom stood on the porch, grinning like a fool. "About time. I was wondering how much longer you two were going to dance around each other," Gray laughed, a sound of pure happiness that Clara had never heard from him before. "Go away, Tom. Not until you tell me I was right about you being perfect for each other." "You were right," Clara called back, laughing. "Now go inside." Tom threw his hands up in victory and disappeared into the house. Gray shook his head, still smiling. "My brother has no sense of timing." "I do not mind," Clara said honestly. "I like that he is happy for us. He is not the only one." Gray cupped her face in his hand, his thumb stroking her cheek. "I am the happiest man in Kansas right now." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Clara felt as though she were floating. Everything had changed in the span of a single conversation, and yet it all felt so right, so natural. This was what she had been missing. She realized not just companionship or security, but this feeling of being truly seen and valued by someone she loved in return. That night, Clara lay in her small room, unable to sleep, replaying every moment of the evening. She thought about how far she had come from the desperate woman who had arrived at this ranch just a few weeks ago. Then, she had been certain she had no hope, no future beyond survival. Now, she had found something she had never dared to dream of: love, real and true. In the morning, things were different. Gray greeted her with a kiss that made Tom groan and pretend to shield his eyes. "You two are going to be insufferable, are you not?" "Absolutely," Gray said cheerfully, not taking his eyes off Clara. The days that followed were some of the happiest of Clara's life. She and Gray stole moments together throughout the day, a kiss in the barn, holding hands while watching the sunset, whispered conversations late at night when the house was quiet. They talked about everything, sharing their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. Clara learned that Gray's father had been a hard man, demanding and often critical. Gray had spent years trying to live up to impossible standards, carrying the weight of responsibility from a young age. His mother had died when he was just 12, leaving him to help raise Tom while also learning to run the ranch. In turn, Clara shared her own story: the loss of her parents, her brief but happy marriage to Richard, the grief and loneliness that had followed his death. She told Gray about the months of struggling to survive, the humiliation of accepting charity, the fear that she would end up destitute and alone. "You never have to be afraid again," Gray promised her. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." It was a promise he would be tested on sooner than either of them expected. 2 weeks after Gray and Clara had confessed their feelings, the trouble they had been warned about arrived. Clara was alone in the house, preparing dinner, when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She went to the window and felt her blood run cold. 4 men on horseback had ridden into the yard, and even from a distance, she could see they meant trouble. They had their guns drawn, and they were demanding something from Gray and Tom, who had been working in the corral. Without thinking, Clara grabbed the rifle Gray kept by the door. She did not know much about guns, but Richard had taught her the basics before he died. She checked to make sure it was loaded, then stepped out onto the porch. "That is far enough," she called, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. The men turned to look at her, and one of them laughed. "Look here, boys, the rancher has himself a woman with a rifle. Ain't that sweet?" "I suggest you ride out of here before someone gets hurt," Clara said, raising the rifle to her shoulder. "Clara, get back inside," Gray shouted, fear evident in his voice. But Clara stayed where she was, the rifle steady in her hands. "I am not afraid of you, and I am a fair shot. So I will give you one more chance to leave peacefully." The leader of the group, a hard-faced man with a scar running down one cheek, studied her with new interest. "You have got courage, I will give you that, but we came for cattle, and we are not leaving empty-handed." "Yes, you are," Clara said firmly. "This ranch has nothing to spare, and you are not taking anything that does not belong to you." The standoff lasted several tense seconds. Then, surprisingly, the scarred man holstered his gun. "Boys, maybe we picked the wrong ranch today. This woman looks like she would shoot us just to prove a point, and I do not feel like dying over a few head of cattle." "We are not leaving," one of the other men protested. "We are," the leader said firmly. "Sometimes you have to know when to fold, and a woman brave enough to face down 4 armed men is not someone I want to tangle with." He tipped his hat to Clara. "You are either very brave or very foolish, madam, but either way, you have earned my respect." With that, the 4 men turned their horses and rode away. Clara kept the rifle raised until they were out of sight, then her legs gave out and she sat down hard on the porch steps. Gray was at her side in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "What were you thinking? They could have killed you." "They could have killed you," Clara countered, her voice shaking now that the danger had passed. "I was not going to stand by and let them hurt you or Tom or steal from you." "You are the most amazing, terrifying woman I have ever met," Gray said, holding her tighter. "Promise me you will never scare me like that again." "I cannot promise that," Clara said honestly. "If you are in danger, I will always try to protect you, just like I know you would protect me." Gray pulled back to look at her, his eyes fierce with emotion. "Marry me, Clara." "I was going to wait to do this properly, but I cannot wait any longer. I need you in my life, not just as my housekeeper or even just as someone I love, but as my wife. Marry me." "Yes," Clara said without hesitation. "Yes, of course I will marry you." They kissed, and Tom, who had been standing awkwardly to the side, let out a whoop of joy. Finally, something good comes out of nearly being robbed. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in Wichita's small church, with Tom standing up as best man and Mrs. Henderson, the woman who came to help with the washing, serving as Clara's witness. Clara wore a simple blue dress that she had made herself from fabric Gray had insisted on buying her in town. It was not fancy, but she felt beautiful in it, especially when she saw the way Gray's eyes lit up when he saw her. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gray kissed Clara with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with happy tears. They celebrated afterward with a meal at the hotel restaurant, the four of them laughing and talking late into the afternoon. That evening, Clara and Gray returned to the ranch as husband and wife. Tom had tactfully decided to spend the night in the bunkhouse with the ranch hands, giving them privacy. Gray carried Clara over the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," Gray said, setting her down gently. "I have been home since the day I arrived," Clara replied. "I just did not know it yet." They went upstairs to Gray's room, now their room, and Clara marveled at how right it all felt. There was no awkwardness between them, just a natural progression of the love and trust they had built over the past months. Gray was gentle and patient, and Clara felt cherished in a way she never had before. They came together with joy and passion, celebrating their union and the future they would build together. Later, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Gray traced patterns on Clara's bare shoulder. "I still cannot believe you are really mine," he murmured. "Sometimes I think I am going to wake up and find out this was all a dream." "It is real," Clara assured him. "We are real." "What did I ever do to deserve you?" Clara turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You saw me as a person, not just a servant. You made me feel valued and safe. You loved me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be. That is what you did to deserve me, Gray Xavier." He kissed her softly. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret it," Clara whispered. "You are everything I ever wanted and so much more than I thought I could have." They made love again, slowly this time, savoring every touch and kiss. Afterward, Clara fell asleep in her husband's arms, feeling more content than she had ever thought possible. The next morning began their new life together. Clara continued to cook and keep house, but now she did it as Gray's wife, not his employee. It was a subtle shift, but it changed everything. She had a say in decisions about the ranch, her opinions valued and respected. Gray consulted her about purchases and plans, treating her as a true partner. As autumn arrived, painting the prairie in shades of gold and rust, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Gray one evening after dinner, nervous about how he would react. They had not talked much about children, and she worried it was too soon. But Gray's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "Really? We are going to have a baby?" "Yes," Clara confirmed, laughing at his obvious joy. "Sometime next spring, I think." Gray picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down again, looking worried. "Sorry, I should be more careful. Are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Should I get the doctor?" "Gray, I am fine. Being pregnant is not an illness." Clara cupped his face in her hands. "I am healthy and strong, and everything is going to be all right." Tom was equally thrilled by the news, already planning to be the best uncle in Kansas. As winter set in, the three of them prepared for the newest addition to their family. Gray insisted on hiring a girl from town to help Clara with the heavier housework, refusing to let her overwork herself. Clara protested at first, but she had to admit it was nice to have the help. The winter was harsh that year, with heavy snows that blanketed the prairie. But inside the ranch house, Clara had never been warmer or happier. She spent the long evenings knitting baby clothes and blankets while Gray carved a beautiful cradle from wood he had been saving for something special. Tom contributed by building a toy box and starting a collection of whimsical animals he whittled during quiet moments. In early April of 1879, Clara went into labor on a bright, breezy morning. Mrs. Henderson came to assist, along with the doctor from town. Gray paced outside the bedroom door, driving Tom crazy with his worry. She is going to be fine, Tom kept saying. Women have babies all the time. But what if something goes wrong? Gray could not shake the memory of losing his mother, though she had died of influenza, not childbirth. It was a long labor, lasting through the day and into the evening. When Clara's cries of pain echoed through the house, Gray nearly broke down the door. Only Tom's physical restraint kept him from barging in. Finally, as the sun was setting, a different cry filled the house, the lusty wail of a newborn baby. Mrs. Henderson opened the door, beaming. "You have a son, Gray. A big, healthy boy, and Clara is doing just fine." Gray did not remember moving, but suddenly he was at Clara's side. She lay exhausted in the bed, her hair damp with sweat, but her face was radiant as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. "Gray, meet your son," Clara said softly. Gray looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. "He is beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are both beautiful." "Do you want to hold him?" Clara offered with trembling hands. Gray took his son, cradling the baby against his chest. The infant settled immediately, his cries fading to soft snuffles. "Hello, little one," Gray murmured. "I am your papa." Clara watched them with tears streaming down her face. What should we name him? They had discussed names but had not been able to agree on one. Now, holding his son, Gray knew exactly what name felt right. "Gabriel," he said. "Gabriel Richard Xavier, after your Richard, so a part of him will always be with us." Clara's tears flowed harder. "That is perfect. Richard would have been honored." Tom peeked in, asking permission before entering. When he saw the baby, his whole face softened. "Well, look at that. He has the Xavier nose already." "He is perfect," Gray said, unable to take his eyes off his son. "Just like his mother," Clara added, reaching for Gray's free hand. The next few weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Gabriel proved to be a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs, keeping his parents awake many nights. But neither Gray nor Clara minded. They took turns walking the floor with him, soothing his cries, marveling at every tiny change as he grew. As spring turned to summer, life settled into a new routine. Clara managed the household with Gabriel on her hip or sleeping in a basket nearby. Gray continued to run the ranch, but he made time every day to be with his wife and son, coming in at midday to hold Gabriel while Clara ate lunch, reading to the baby in the evenings even though Gabriel was too young to understand the words. One evening in late June, Clara found Gray sitting in the rocking chair he had brought down from the attic, holding their sleeping son. The sun was setting, casting golden light through the window, and the sight made Clara's heart squeeze with love. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling on the arm of the chair. "I am thinking about how different my life is now from what I thought it would be," Gray said softly, careful not to wake Gabriel. "A year ago, I was just trying to survive each day, keep the ranch running, take care of Tom. I never let myself hope for more than that. And now," Clara prompted, "now I have everything I never knew I needed. A wife I love more than I thought possible to love another person. A son who is the best thing I have ever been part of creating. A home that is really a home, full of life and laughter." He looked up at Clara, his eyes shining. "You did this, Clara. You came here with nothing but hope and determination, and you transformed everything." "We did it together," Clara corrected. "You gave me a place to belong when I was lost. You loved me when I had given up on being loved. You made me believe I could have a future worth living." Gray shifted Gabriel to one arm and pulled Clara down into his lap, kissing her tenderly. "I love you, Clara Xavier." "I love you too, Gray Xavier," Clara whispered against his lips. Gabriel stirred in Gray's arms, making the little snuffling sounds that meant he would wake soon, probably hungry. Clara took him, settling into the rocking chair to nurse him while Gray watched them with an expression of complete contentment. "Do you ever think about the fact that if I had not placed that advertisement, we never would have met?" Gray mused. "I think about it sometimes," Clara admitted. "But I also think we were meant to find each other somehow. Maybe not the specific circumstances, but the universe has a way of bringing together people who belong together." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, I have to believe that all the pain and loss I went through was meaningless. But if it led me here, to you and Gabriel and this life we are building, then it all had purpose." Gray knelt beside the rocking chair and wrapped his arms around both Clara and Gabriel. "Then I am grateful for every moment that led us to this one, even the hard ones. Because this right here, this is worth everything." As summer progressed, the ranch prospered. The cattle were healthy, and Gray was able to hire 2 more permanent hands to help with the increased work. Tom, who had turned 26 that spring, had grown into a capable rancher in his own right, taking on more responsibility and showing the same dedication as his older brother. One afternoon in August, Tom came into the kitchen where Clara was making preserves from berries she had picked. "Clara, can I talk to you about something?" "Of course." Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "What is it?" Tom looked uncharacteristically nervous. "You remember Sarah Miller, the daughter of the man who runs the general store in town?" Clara nodded. She had met Sarah a few times, a pretty young woman of about 22 with a quick smile and intelligent eyes. "Well, I have been courting her for a few months now," Tom continued, "and I think I am going to ask her to marry me. But I wanted to talk to you first, make sure you would be all right with another woman in the house." Clara felt a surge of warmth for her brother-in-law. "Tom, that is wonderful. Sarah seems like a lovely girl, and you deserve to be as happy as Gray and I are. Of course, I am all right with it. This house is big enough for all of us, and I would love to have another woman around." Tom's relief was palpable. "Thank you. I was worried you might feel like I was trying to push you out or something." "Never," Clara assured him. "You are family, Tom. And Sarah will be family too when you marry her." Tom did propose, and Sarah accepted. They were married in October in a ceremony that was slightly more elaborate than Gray and Clara's had been, with more of the town invited. Sarah moved into the ranch house, taking one of the upstairs bedrooms that Clara had helped her decorate. She proved to be easy to live with, cheerful and hardworking, and she and Clara quickly became close friends. With Sarah helping with the household duties, Clara found she had more time to spend with Gabriel, who was growing rapidly. By his first birthday in April of 1880, he was walking and starting to say simple words. Gray was a devoted father, teaching Gabriel about the horses and cattle, letting the toddler help with simple tasks around the ranch. Clara discovered she was pregnant again that summer, and this time Gray was able to be calmer about it, though no less excited. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace Ellen Xavier, was born in February of 1881. She was a quieter baby than Gabriel had been, with Clara's green eyes and Gray's dark hair. Tom and Sarah welcomed their first child that same year, a son they named Daniel. The house was full of life and noise, with children toddling through the rooms and the sounds of family everywhere. Clara sometimes had to stop and marvel at how much her life had changed since that day she had arrived at the ranch with nothing but a worn carpetbag and no hope for the future. One evening, when Grace was about 6 months old, Clara and Gray finally had a quiet moment alone on the porch. They sat together on the swing Gray had built, watching the sun set over the prairie. "You ever miss the quiet?" Clara asked, thinking of how chaotic the house had been that day, with Gabriel and Daniel getting into mischief while Grace cried from teething. "Never," Gray said firmly. I spent too many years with too much quiet. This noise, this chaos, this life, it is everything I ever wanted but was afraid to hope for. Me too, Clara agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. When I stepped off that wagon 3 years ago, I thought I was at the end of hope. I had lost everyone I loved, I had no money, no prospects. I thought keeping house for a couple of ranchers was going to be the sum total of my future. And instead, I found a home, I found love, I found a purpose and a family and a reason to wake up happy every morning. Clara lifted her head to look at her husband. You made me the lady of your heart, Gray Xavier. But more than that, you made me believe in myself again. You gave me back my hope. Gray cupped her face in his calloused hand, his touch infinitely gentle. Clara, you have always been worthy of love and respect and happiness. I did not give you those things, I just recognized what was already there and loved you for it. You saved yourself. I was just lucky enough to be there when you did. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Inside the house, they could hear Sarah singing to the babies and Tom's voice joining in, slightly off-key but enthusiastic. It was the sound of family, of home, of love. Come on, Gray said, standing and offering Clara his hand. Let us go help put those babies to bed. Clara took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. As they walked back into the house together, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. Every hardship, every loss, every moment of despair had been a step on the path to this life. She would not wish those painful times on anyone, but she could be grateful for what they had taught her about resilience and strength. She had come to this ranch as a housekeeper with no hope, desperate and alone. But she had found so much more than employment. She had found love, family, purpose, and a future brighter than anything she had imagined. Gray had made her the lady of his heart, but in doing so, he had helped her become the lady of her own heart as well, strong, capable, worthy of the love and happiness that filled her life. As Clara lay in bed that night, Gray's arm around her, and the sounds of their sleeping children drifting through the open door, she offered up a prayer of thanksgiving for the unexpected blessings that had transformed her life. She had learned that hope could be found in the most unlikely places, that love could grow from the simplest beginnings, and that sometimes the end of one story was really just the beginning of another, better one. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. The ranch prospered under the combined efforts of Gray and Tom, expanding their herd and eventually acquiring more land. Clara and Sarah worked together to make the house a warm, welcoming home, hosting gatherings for neighbors and creating traditions for their growing family. Gabriel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with his father and the horses. Grace was more adventurous, always climbing trees and getting into scrapes with her cousin Daniel. Sarah and Tom had 2 more children, twin girls who kept everyone on their toes. Through it all, Clara and Gray's love remained the foundation of the family. They supported each other through hard times, a drought that threatened the cattle, a winter so harsh they lost part of the herd, the inevitable conflicts and challenges that came with running a ranch and raising a family. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Gray surprised Clara with a trip to Denver, arranging for Sarah and Tom to watch the children for a week. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since Grace's birth, and they reveled in the freedom to focus entirely on each other. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and attended a theatrical performance. But the best moments were the quiet ones in their room, talking late into the night about their dreams for the future, making love without worrying about being overheard. simply enjoying being husband and wife without the responsibilities of parents and ranchers. "I do not need fancy trips or expensive gifts," Clara told Gray on their last night in Denver. "I just need you and the life we have built together." "I know," Gray said, pulling her close. "But you deserve to be spoiled sometimes, to be reminded that you are not just a mother and a rancher's wife, but a woman who is loved and cherished." "You remind me of that every day," Clara said softly. "In the way you look at me across the dinner table. In the way you always kiss me goodnight, no matter how tired you are. In the way you support my ideas and value my opinions. I have never felt unloved or unappreciated, Gray. Not once in 10 years. "Good," Gray murmured, kissing her deeply. "Because I plan to keep loving and appreciating you for the rest of our lives." They returned to the ranch renewed and reconnected, throwing themselves back into family life with fresh energy. Clara had been worried that the children might have run wild in their absence, but Sarah and Tom had managed beautifully, and both Gabriel and Grace had missed their parents terribly, making the reunion especially sweet. As the children grew older, they each developed their own personalities and interests. Gabriel, as expected, took to ranching naturally, following his father everywhere and learning everything he could about cattle and horses and land management. By the time he was 16, he was as capable as any of the hired hands. Grace, to everyone's surprise, showed a talent for numbers and bookkeeping. Gray taught her how to manage the ranch accounts, and she soon became indispensable to the operation. She also inherited her mother's compassionate nature, often bringing home stray animals or organizing help for families in town who had fallen on hard times. Tom and Sarah's children were equally remarkable in their own ways. Daniel became interested in veterinary medicine after helping birth a difficult foal, and eventually went away to study at an agricultural college. The twins, Emily and Ella, were inseparable and full of mischief, keeping their parents constantly entertained and occasionally exasperated. One spring evening, when Clara was 45 years old and Gray was nearly 50, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The house behind them was quiet, with all the children grown and most of them moved into their own homes. Gabriel had married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and was building a house on a piece of land Gray had given him. Grace was courting a young lawyer from Wichita and would likely be married within the year. Tom and Sarah's children were all finding their own paths as well. "It is strange how quiet the house is now," Clara observed. "I remember when we could not hear ourselves think over all the noise." "I miss it sometimes," Gray admitted, "but I am also enjoying having you to myself again." Clara smiled, threading her fingers through his. "We have been blessed, have we not? So much more than I ever imagined that day I arrived here." "I think about that day sometimes," Gray said. "I remember seeing you step down from that wagon, looking so determined despite being exhausted and afraid. I had no idea that woman would change my entire life." "I was terrified," Clara confessed. "I was at the end of my resources, my hope. I thought I would just work for you until I could save enough to move somewhere else, maybe start a boarding house or find some other way to support myself. I never dreamed I would find love, a family, a home." "You brought all of that with you," Gray said. "You just needed someone to recognize it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Clara thought about the journey she had taken, from desperate widow to beloved wife and mother, from housekeeper to lady of the ranch in every sense that mattered. It had not always been easy. There had been struggles and sorrows along with the joys, but every step had been worth it. "Do you have any regrets?" Gray asked, as though reading her thoughts. Clara considered the question seriously. "I regret that Richard died so young, I regret that my parents never got to see me truly happy, but I do not regret anything about the path that brought me to you. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of fear and uncertainty led me here. How could I regret that? I love you, Clara Xavier, Gray said, his voice rough with emotion. More today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you to me, Clara replied, turning to kiss him. My cowboy who made me the lady of his heart. Always, Gray promised, until my last breath and beyond. They stayed on the porch until the night grew cool, then went inside together, hand in hand, to the home they had built and the life they had created. Behind them, the prairie stretched out under the stars, wild and beautiful and enduring. And in that house, love endured too, as strong and steady as it had been from the beginning. The years ahead would bring more changes grandchildren to spoil, new challenges to face, the inevitable aches and pains of aging bodies. But Clara and Gray would face it all together, their love the constant in a changing world. They had proven that hope could be found even in the darkest moments, that love could transform everything, and that sometimes the best things in life came when you least expected them. Clara had come to the ranch as a housekeeper with no hope, but she had found so much more than she ever could have imagined. She had found her place in the world, her purpose, her family, and the great love of her life. And Gray had found the same in her, a partner, a companion, the lady of his heart who had made his house a home and his life complete. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. And that, Clara thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, was the truest measure of a life well lived, not wealth or status, but love shared, family cherished, and hope fulfilled. She had been given a second chance at happiness, and she had seized it with both hands, building a life richer than any she could have dreamed. The story that had begun with desperation and ended in joy was not just her story, it was their story, hers and Gray's, woven together into something greater than either of them could have created alone. And it was a story that would continue through their children and grandchildren, a legacy of love and resilience that would endure long after they were gone. Clara had come as a housekeeper with no hope. But the cowboy had made her the lady of his heart, and in doing so, had given her everything that truly mattered: love, family, home, and a future filled with promise. It was, she reflected as sleep claimed her, the happiest of endings and the best of all possible lives.